Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast, and we're going to continue what we've been doing since August on Third Age Thursdays, looking at the poetry and songs from The Lord of the Rings. Now, last week we listened in to Frodo's lament for Gandalf and Sam's own extra verse. This week we stay in Lorien, but this time we'll be listening in to Galadriel as she sings about Eldamar. They turned a sharp bend in the river, and there, sailing proudly down the stream towards them, they saw a swan of great size. The water rippled on either side of the white breast beneath its curving neck. Its beak shone like burnished gold, and its eyes glinted like jet set in yellow stones. Its huge white wings were half lifted. A music came down the river as it drew nearer, and suddenly they perceived that it was a ship, wrought and carved with elven skill in the likeness of a bird. 2 elves clad in white steered it with black paddles. In the midst of the vessel sat Celeborn, and behind him stood Galadriel, tall and white. A circlet of golden flowers was in her hair, and in her hand she held a harp, and she sang. Sad and sweet was the sound of her voice in the cool, clear air. I sang of leaves of gold, and leaves of gold there grew. Of wind I sang, a wind there came, and in the branches blew. Beyond the sun, beyond the moon, the foam was on the sea, and by the strand of Ilmarin there grew a golden tree. Beneath the stars of Evereve in Eldamar it shone, in Eldamar beside the walls of elven Tirion. There long the golden leaves have grown upon the branching years, while here beyond the sundering seas now fall the elven tears. O Lorien, the winter comes, the bare and leafless day. The leaves are falling in the stream, the river flows away. O Lorien, too long I have dwelt upon this hither shore, and in a fading crown have twined the golden Elenor. But if of ships I now should sing, what ship would come to me? What ship would bear me ever back across so wide a sea? There are a few things to talk about here. A good thing, or this would be far too short an episode. Those first couple of lines, singing of leaves, and poof, leaves grow. Singing of wind, and a wind blows. This feels very much like the power of song for creative, or in this case rather, sub-creative efforts, reminding us that the entire existence was sung into being. Now, Beyond the Sun and Moon already gives us a clue that we're talking about Aman, but By the Strand of Ilmarin confirms it. The Hill of Ilmarin is another name for Taniquetil, or Oilose, though properly Ilmarin is the name of the mansions of Manwë and Varda atop the mountain. It's a Quenya word, meaning, according to the unfinished index that's available in Hammond and Skull's Reader's Companion, Mansion of the High Airs. Now, in the next song, Galadriel will refer to this place again, but there she'll use the Quenya name Oromardi, lofty halls. So, it's by this strand that this golden tree has grown. What golden tree is that? Well, if you guessed Laurelin, you'd be very, very wrong. Laurelin wasn't in Eldamar. It was on the hill named Azelohar outside the western gate of Valmar. In their Reader's Companion, Hammond and Skull suggest that this golden tree she sings about is perhaps symbolic of the life of the elves in the Blessed Realm, compared to the winter of their life in mortal lands. But in their more recent work, the 3-volume collected poems of J.R.R. Tolkien, they say that a simpler explanation could be that the tree in question is a Malorn, whose leaves fall not, but turn to gold in autumn, and fall only when the new green opens and the boughs are laden with yellow flowers. The coming of winter feels like a metaphor for the long passage of time, but Skull and Hammond in that collected poems volume look at the fragmentary and, as they put it, largely illegible manuscript that dates back to 1941, and while they can't read much of it, what they can read suggests that Tolkien's initial thoughts were to comment on the passage of time through the change of seasons. Next, there's such a strong and clear recollection of all of these places. Remember, Elve's memory is virtually flawless, so of course it's like yesterday for her. And because of that memory, the bitterness of being here is deep. Now, the last couple of lines remind us of the ban. What ship would come to me? What ship would bear me ever back across so wide a sea? But the idea of the ban opens up a huge can of proverbial worms because the story of Galadriel shifted so many times, and all of that shifting after The Lord of the Rings. Because, as Skull and Hammond point out, Galadriel had not appeared in Tolkien's writings before The Lord of the Rings. And even here in the text, there is some confusion. This line appears to be her fondly recalling her former home in Eldamar beside the walls of Elven-Tirion. But her question suggests that she knows or believes she is subject to the doom. Just a bit ago, in the Mirror of Galadriel, Frodo offered her the ring. She resisted the temptation and said, "I passed the test. I will diminish and go into the west and remain Galadriel," which sure implies that she at least believes she has the right to return. Now, I'm honestly not sure where I'd fit it in on a TTT episode, but one day I'd like to do an entire episode, maybe even two, talking about the confusing history of Galadriel and the band, but that won't be today. Still, I want to thank you folks for joining me for this week's Third Age Thursday. Be sure to come back tomorrow for First Age Friday for more poetry in the Lay of Lathian. And check out patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, join my content council, get a bonus weekly episode, and more. Now, this is Past Future Alan coming back to make a change to the episode. Those of you on video can undoubtedly tell that from the mismatched clothing. Now, you may have seen or heard the exciting news last week that soon, but not quite yet, the Prancing Pony podcast is going to be back on YouTube as I begin my new streaming show, The Prancing Pony Podcast Plays. Now, in the meantime, since I'm going to be combining all four of the PPP Productions content into one YouTube channel, I want to consolidate social media as well. So please be sure to follow @PrancingPonyPod on Twitter, or X if you want to call it that, Blue Sky, Instagram, and TikTok. On Facebook, we're still at the Prancing Pony Podcast. And finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.